most useful to you?
Hey. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Well, I don't know if we're actually going to use machine learning. We're on the team that so we're looking at the news, at the media, how people are consuming the media, if they trust the media that they are consuming, how the information is actually spread, and we're actually like trying to work our way around the issue of how do you deal with a society that is trying to catch up with all this scientific material that tends to be not easy to understand.
Right.
Actually, the main reason that I'm here is I am in data science. I'm actually still in my last year of university, and I'm very interested in to see how machine learning is actually integrated in the medical world as well, and how it is used in practice, definitely in these kind of cases.
Cool. That makes a lot of sense. And then Sriram, I see that you're here.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about your team and what you're hoping to get out of the next, half an hour of learning.
All right. So my team is Team D005, and we are talking about, and we are looking up ways to invent a method of a grounds up reporting system for new scarce resources to combat community spread of COVID-19. And I was proposing a kind of addition to the blood sugar app for diabetics to monitor, to notify them whenever there are possibly COVID-19 positive people, tested positive people that are nearby them within a certain radius, based on, and it'll identify them based on the database of people that have been tested. And as for this webinar, I hope to learn. I hope to learn how to be able to use InterSystems to combat COVID-19, to find ways to combat COVID-19 community spread.
Okay. Perfect. So what I prepared was some material that I think will match what all three of you said. And with this size, just jump in with questions or comments. The first thing I wanted to open with is I work at a place called InterSystems, and we're a sponsor for this hackathon. We're literally next door to MIT and very hooked in, and we're excited to help in any way we can. So there's a bunch of mentors. I'm going to be talking more specifically about our product or technology stack, which we're giving to teams for free. And if it's useful to you, that's what it's all about. And I'll keep coming back to this site, this Getting Started Health Hackathon, which is where we've set up tools for teams to use. But the subject of this next, I'll say 20 to 30 minutes is specifically around machine learning, and using machine learning more easily than I think has traditionally been available. This integrated ML is an InterSystems thing. That's a feature name. We have video on, so hopefully I look a little bit like my photo. But I plan to start first a little bit with healthcare data, because for most of the teams here, one of the things we can help with is getting access to clinical data. For Hendrik, where you're really thinking about media data, the techniques apply, and maybe healthcare data per se is less relevant. But it sounds like both for Brinda and Sriram, there's a element of that in what I heard you say about your teams. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and then get into what is this thing, integrated ML, how do you use it, and show you how to use it. And For this weekend, if you're just working on your pitch and you don't have technical resources, then it's just for you to know what it is, think about how you'd use it, put it in your pitch if necessary. If you want to hack and build, we have this stuff all set up for you. Does that make sense? If one of you can come off mute and tell me whether this matches what you were hoping to get out of out of this time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, definitely.
So, one very high level observation that we often make, it's like sometimes I give talks, I ask people what the biggest breakthrough in medical care was over the last 100 years, where we've basically doubled life expectancy, and people guess all kinds of things about modern medicine, but it really boils down to clean water and public health. And the basic vision that that our company has is that clean data and access to good data and then using it in all kinds of ways is what will really, change things both in this pandemic and certainly beyond. And if you've never heard of InterSystems, you're not alone. We're sort of a well-kept secret, but it's a fairly big company. It's $750 million in revenue. 70% of that is in healthcare, and we work with a very broad spectrum. So in the pandemic, a lot of the lab customers we have, like Roche, or are rapidly putting out testing and contact tracing stuff. All the providers, ranging from the Veneto region in northern Italy, where we share data across 18 hospitals, to New York City, where Brenda, the Healthix, is run by InterSystems, as is Northwell Health. Information things like Manifest Medics, which is a healthcare information exchange for the state of California. So it's kind of neat to be in the position of being able to help across this big spectrum. And what we build software for builders, for the most part. So, just an example is a company called Gerbe, and I'm mentioning them. Almost all of a lot of our customers have done interesting things in this pandemic, but this is maybe to give you a sense of mixing data from multiple places. And these guys have specialized in contrast medicine, by which I mean, if you're having an MRI, you get an injection of a particular dye, or if you are, a lot of this is diagnostic, but often if it's you're doing open heart surgery, there's often a contrast media that's injected. And it's been very much sort of the dark ages. You get the same dose whether you're a man or a woman, whether you're 100 pounds or 200 pounds. And Gerbe has specializes in this. So they've used the same product that I'm talking about to take data from lots of different places. And the green stuff at the bottom are things that you find in hospitals, like the emergency room, the operating rooms, intensive care. PACS are the systems that are used to keep images. EMR is the electronic medical record. That's where people's patient records are, et cetera, as well as all this device data. And then they personalize the dose based upon not just your height, weight stuff, but do you have diabetes? Do you have your specific medical record, and then they keep that data and then they correlate it with outcome in order to improve treatment. For the pandemic, these guys have done applied this to asthma and lung issues, where you can take a lung X-ray and get better diagnostic treatment of, like, is this normal pneumonia, how COVID related is it, et cetera. And it's an example you can imagine where this data might come from anywhere. It might be a news feed. It might be surveillance data from a national group. We're working with the CDC and the WHO to collect data. We have one of the templates up on our hackathon site is as much public COVID data as we can get. But we're often in play when you want to mix that with healthcare data. And the product's name are IRIS, which is an acronym for, well, I call it really is simple, but it's a multi-model database that has built-in interoperability. So you're pulling data from lots of places. You want to connect into, you name it, a hospital system or a public health system, or you want to pull things from a newswire or a feed. We try to make that easy. We've built in our own natural language processing. So if you're looking to parse out meaning from the language or look for cluster concepts and synonyms thereof, that might be particularly useful for the medical terminology or literature or news feeds. One of the templates we have up there is all of the National Library of Medicine has published all of the medical literature about COVID, and we have a browser using our NLP for that, but also BI and reporting. And then when people want to connect in and include patient data or provider data, things about doctors or nurses, there's a flavor called Iris for Health that has these healthcare protocols. There's a lot of different healthcare protocols. FHIR stands for Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources. It's a REST-based, relatively new standard for exchanging things. Most of the world is still running on earlier variant called HL7 2.5. There's things like DICOM, which is for image stuff, X12, which is for payer records, insurance, things of that sort, and so on and so forth. And we've built in all of these alphabet soup protocols so that perhaps you're bringing in these document CDA or clinical document architecture. If you have your medical record is in a document form called a CDA. These HL7 things, if you want to, let's say, get a notification anytime someone is admitted to the hospital, that's called an ADM record. So you can subscribe to that, or people that are looking for utilization of hospital beds or ICUs, that's typically on this HL7. If you're looking for things around supply chain or PPE, a lot of that data is X12 data. And the idea is that if you're building an app, you should know those things exist, but you shouldn't need to be an expert in FHIR or HL7. We build all that in, and then you can use APIs to use that data. Any questions about that so far before I get into the machine learning part? Sriram, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm making this up because we haven't really talked about your team, but I could imagine that a blood sugar app might want to pull somewhat an individual's healthcare records, which we have the infrastructure for.
Nice. Sure. Do you know the name of the exact repository again?
Well, these are things where you make your own repository, and across the world, but especially in the U.S., this clinical data is highly fragmented. It's, your health record isn't owned by you; it's owned by your medical provider. And I could talk for a long time about that. But if you want specific advice about how to get which data for what, then just ask for a mentor, or we have a partner channel, and we've got people that live and breathe that stuff.
Okay.
So
now, this is global. Sorry to interrupt. This is global medical data from all sorts of all countries' medical systems, right?
these are global standards.
Yep.
There is no single source of medical records
Sure.
worldwide.
Yeah.
We have a product called HealthShare, which is used for what are called health information exchanges, and those tend to be region-wide. Like in Italy, there's 5 of them. They're state level in the U.S., and those are shared data and we provide a unified patient record, because the average Medicare patient in the U.S. has 9 different providers, so very fragmented. And as I say, we could talk about that a lot.
Sure.
But if you want to build an app that accesses these streams of data in the healthcare system, or accesses patient records, that's a lot of what we do. And if you want to know how that works in a way that might help your team, then just ask for help.
Great, thank you.
Because it's going to depend upon your specific idea, I think. So the advertised topic of this was really about our integrated ML feature and machine learning. And let me run into that. Everybody's heard of machine learning. You can't, unless you live under a rock. But there's a couple of issues today, one of which is this is very scarce talent, the demand supply curve. So Hendrik, you're in a really good position, having chosen to be a data scientist. But there's a demand problem. The other issue is that there's a big gap between people who are making these machine learning models and the people who actually run production systems. So less than half, depends upon what data you look at, but one of our partners, Data Robot, tells us that they see like a 20% success rate in moving things from data science into actual operations. So that's a big problem in general in the industry. And the last is that there's more automation, but it's still very spotty. And there's a technique called AutoML, which if you're in data science, you can't not know about. But if you're not, someone like Brenda, perhaps, the traditional way to do machine learning, I'll back up. If you don't, there's tons of information about machine learning, but you can think of this as creating algorithms from the data rather than taking existing algorithms and running data through it. So it all starts from the data. And preparing that data, well, first of all, collecting that data in some sensible form is a lot of work. Preparing it and doing what's called feature engineering, which are the things that are the variables that are most likely to matter to a particular problem, and how do they relate to the data you have. And then there's a lot of different models that are applicable to different problems. You know, many logistic problems. You may have heard something, you know, you might use a classifier. A lot of things are using XGBoost, or you might have heard of, you know, neural nets. And then you train your model on that data. Perhaps you tune it, then you deploy it. And there's a lot of steps. The AutoML technology is essentially applying machine learning to machine learning and saying, well, let's let the machine learn how to do feature engineering and automate as much of that process as possible. Well, how does a data scientist choose the model where it's really about what is the best model? You just run them all, and you use something called a leaderboard to figure out which are the best ones. And then often you're using a combination of them in something called ensemble learning. So this simplification is not unique to InterSystems, but it's one of the things that makes it possible to simplify this machine learning in AutoML. So what we're doing, first of all, whether you work with InterSystems or not, whether you want to use our stack, just look for AutoML if you're doing machine learning as a simplifier, and be aware that this data preparation is still a huge amount of work, often 80% of the data scientist work. What we've built, and this is new, so we're very interested in having people try it and give us feedback, and very motivated. We're highly motivated to help people in any way we can with the pandemic, but especially so around this, is something which makes this available to, I'll say, ordinary smart developers that may not be machine learning experts, but know databases and SQL. And we provide 3 options of different AutoML providers, one of which we have packaged with the best open source packages and made so you don't have to think about the knobs. It's sort of a black box from an application developer standpoint. The second of which, H2O, is an open source AutoML package that if you are in fact a do-it-yourselfer and you want to twiddle all the knobs, that's good. And then the third is Data Robot, and they're sort of the Rolls-Royce of AutoML, including having hundreds of data scientists that can help you, train you, help and do staff augmentation, and get you to success. And those engines are plugged in behind the scenes. You basically say, well, yeah, why don't I use H2O? Otherwise, everything is the same. And there's a couple of basic concepts. You start with the data, like always in machine learning. You're using SQL to understand your problem. You train it, resulting in a trained model, and then you validate it, which is you're getting a sense for how accurate it is or isn't through a metric. And it looks like this. This is Squirrel. It's just an open source SQL browser, and it's fed, in this case, with breast cancer data. So if you just want to look at the data as a table, this is just standard SQL. Select star. This says show it all to me, and typically this is dozens or hundreds of columns. And then you use create model, and create model, the idea is you're saying, I want to predict the diagnosis, which should be a column that has some training data in it. And what that does is look at the shape of the data, pick the provider, and just sort of set it up. And then you use predict, and predict is just basically says what it sounds like. Top 50 is, show me the top 50 results. So this is a simple thing. I'm just basically now going to run things and predict whether someone has breast cancer based upon the model. And I'll show it, in this case, next to the actual diagnosis. And behind the scenes, it's doing what's called a train test split for validation. If you're at all familiar with SQL, there's a huge amount of power in SQL, and we're just leveraging that. So you can say, well, I will do that, and I'm going to list the probability. This is sometimes called a confidence score. So I'll use a prediction if it's a high confidence score, but I won't if it's a low confidence score. And I can order by probability. I can use what are called materialized views. I can take data from multiple places and join it first, and then use that in a training or prediction. So as long as you have the data in a database, then you can work very, very easily with it. And predict also has parameters. This says, like, I have a particular instance of a tumor that has this radius, texture, area, perimeter, and this is predicted to be malignant, not benign. And the idea, we're focused on things that can be real-time predictions, not just bulk. So, and then to take this into production, you're simply adding this code to your application. So a lot of applications are already in SQL. But if you're starting from scratch, you can get good life out of an app very quickly, and then dig into the data science to fine tune it and understand what's going on. There's a lot of art and science to validating and tuning and training models. And we have a SQL primitive called validate model that gives back a lot of the basics. Is this a good model or a bad model? And then when you want to go deeper, if you're using H2O, you're in standard open source tools. If you're using Data Robot, they have a very, very nice console that measures what's called drift. A model may drift over time. or you might have trained for one part of Nigeria and now you've got data from another part and you want to see is it different. So just to summarize, what we're proud of is that this is really simple. It's much simpler for people that aren't data science experts than anything we've seen out there. And you really just think of it as create model, train model, and predict.
That's amazing.
So it sounds, are you Jeff or Jeffrey, by the way?
Either was fine. I typically go by Jeff.
All right, me too. It sounds like you know a little bit about data science already, and feedback on this and using it. You know, we're in a beta period now. Feedback has been really good. It's different than most approaches because it's SQL oriented.
Yeah, that's really, like, that's such a big deal, because a lot of the functions that I've done research into, I don't have much experience working with ML. I've done research on it and obviously done some YouTube video stuff and trying to figure this out. And a lot of that has been sort of R-based machine learning stuff. But I'm definitely more well-versed in the SQL sphere. And of course, as you mentioned, SQL is very, very, very good with working with big data. So this is a game changer, and this is really good. Our team is sort of, not to take up too much time here, but we're working on something that will be able to essentially let the patient know based on some criteria that they provide whether they should probably seek a doctor's attention or not. Sort of to expedite the process a little bit to alleviate pressure off of the Medicare systems. That's sort of the high level. There's some nitty-gritty details in there, and we wanted to incorporate some machine learning in there to help with facilitate those decisions. And this is fantastic because I can easily put together a SQL solution, and this is going to make it so much better.
That's great to hear. Well, I think we have a variety of material about it. You know, we have a standard web page is business oriented. We have a conference paper that's
okay. So
essentially,
oh sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead, Bashir.
So essentially, you're basically connecting to the SQL database.
Yes, we are a database.
Okay.
And in that database, we have integrated in as part of our analytics this integrated ML, which is why it's called integrated. So you feed stuff into the database either through SQL or just loading up tables, or we have this interoperability stuff, which you can think of as it has both device stuff through MQTT or things like that. If you're using, let's say medical devices or field devices, I could talk for a long time. So we built in a lot of things to make it easy to get the data in from lots of places. We've built in a lot of things that are specifically focused on patient and provider data and unified care record and things of that sort. So now you have the data, and we want to make it easy for you to apply machine learning to it. Up to this point, we've had an expert proposition. If you've been through a program, we make it through Spark and Jupyter Notebooks. We make it easy for you to use the standard tools. But most of our customers haven't had enough people trained. They're all SQL oriented, and that's really what's different about that. And then, you build it in your audit and you want to turn it on for production, it's right there. So, Bashir, does that?
Yeah, awesome.
I had a quick question.
Yeah.
I saw earlier in the slides there some mention of Azure. We're thinking of probably doing some development work in that sphere. Is
Yep.
there any, I guess, accessibility from the Azure platform to AutoML or similar libraries?
Yeah.
Okay.
So let me show you a couple of resources that, and you can also in the Slack channel for InterSystems ask for help. We've got, like I said, a bunch of mentors that live this. We have a package for hacking at the system that has a couple of pre-built things to anticipating that when people really wanted to build stuff, they'd either want to be able to work with getting device data in. This takes all of the medical literature that's public around COVID and has it in a consolidated database and then applies NLP to it to browse conceptual browsing. That, and Hendrik, that might be interesting to you with respect to trying to make sense of the sort of complex medical terms. And this takes the public data like the Johns Hopkins stuff and a bunch of everything we could find and puts it into a template. These are all things you can run on your desktop or on any of the public cloud guys. If you are specifically in Azure Marketplace and you're looking for, you can either just pull this stuff and run it in Azure, or you can use this community edition, either as a container or a VM.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
So, and the community edition is free for developers. So, but, you know, let's say you have a team and you want, you know, we can also, for teams that are really, we think we're really able to help and have a, get them good chance, we have credits with Microsoft and with Amazon that could help teams.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay, and if you're interested in more specifically about integrated ML, there's short videos, there's a resource guide, and also we have people. So the idea is if you're just working on your pitch right now and you want to know, hey, is it easy or hard to get at various data sources and then apply machine learning on it, this will help you just have confidence that this is possible. And I see some teams that that's really what they want for the weekend.
Yep.
If you really want to build it, or you want to show a prototype, and that there's a lot teams that we're in the last cohort, or there's folks that already have a pretty strong idea and want to, let's say, have your blood sugar app tied in with a COVID screener, and you want to calibrate it, or you want to look at, I just was mentoring a team earlier this morning that already had specific, like, what features of the public COVID data matter most for this prediction? Well, just try it. And on this Zoom call, the guy who you can see, Tom Dyer, also with headphones, he's a specialist on this particular feature and product. So we really want to help teams because, as I said to Brenda earlier, it feels a lot better when you can actually help in the pandemic in some way.
Ain't that the truth?
So Bashir, you joined late, but I'd asked people to describe their teams and what you were up to, both because maybe somebody else on here will be interested, and also we can maybe pinpoint questions and answers. Talk a little bit about your team and how does ML relate to it? Just like calling on somebody in class. Are you there?
COVID-19 timeline in a nutshell.
Yeah.
So Jeff, I was just going to say that for those Azure Marketplace listing, I put in the chat here, but I don't know if that integrated ML is going to be
I don't
part of
think it
that.
is, not this weekend. Yeah,
Right.
so you're right. So if you're going to try it this weekend, go off of the pointers you have on this getting started, off this hackathon site to get integrated ML.
Yeah, it's just.
And did you say, sorry, did you say it was working for Azure, or sorry, what was that?
It works for Azure.
Okay.
But there's different ways of getting it. The Azure Marketplace stuff, Tom was saying, oh, this doesn't say integrated ML in it. It's because we haven't published it to these listings yet.
Okay.
So,
well, like you said before, this is definitely a weekend for conceptualizing and finalizing a proof of concept. So that more than covers that base. Of course, I'd love to be able to do some hacking around and testing it out and see how it integrates with our application. That's what it's all about. But like you said, this is sort of the thing that you can put into an already existing SQL system. So that has all bases covered.
Yep. Any other questions or answers or ways we can help you? Brenda, was this useful to you?
Yeah, it was very useful. I had, I was very beginner in this, so it opened up a lot.
Go ahead.
I'm just thinking of, it seems like, you mentioned Northwell and stuff. Like, how do you integrate this in places that are not as technologically advanced?
That's a really good question. Frankly, we have no customers in sub-Saharan Africa. We have got a lot of customers in South Africa, the country, but that's sort of like classic, right? And I have a colleague that is part of a pro bono group that specifically is setting up access for underdeveloped countries that did a project in, I think, Rwanda last year, who is also mentoring this weekend. All of this stuff applies. The issue is that if it all starts with the data, and the data is really depending upon an infrastructure and a process that may not exist.
Okay.
And I've seen two different approaches to this. One is to work on putting that in place. Let's help the healthcare systems have a basic medical data infrastructure to track things. And that's what my colleague Jonathan is helping with. And the other is sort of to leapfrog the whole thing and say, let me see if there's any way I can put an iPad per village and let people do data entry on that. Or I'm going to send, we have a product called Track Care that's used, that has remote workers, and it's being used in the Northwest Territory in Australia for indigenous populations where they have no healthcare system.
Wow.
And this is basically on a laptop with somebody that is going out on a Jeep or a camel and doing really remote field healthcare. And it gives them the tools, and then they collect whatever they have. And it's very common, like they happen to see somebody and they look at the whole family while they're there. But that sort of leapfrogging is probably better. You know much more about Nigeria than I do.
Yeah, no, this is good. To understand that there are people who are spearheading this.
Yes,
Right.
and if you can ask, I forget the name of this group that's on the former, but ask a question of Jonathan Teich on our partner channel about the group that is goes out to underdeveloped countries and tries to help them set up medical EHR systems. For your team, it's figure out what data there is. You know, what kind of surveillance data exists, and then you work with the data you've got.
Sure, sure. Thank you.
Sri Ram, was this useful to you?
Yeah, this was really useful for me. I had no idea that there was this was kind of open source. This open source kind of MySQL database was out there. Yeah, it was really useful. It was really useful talking about this.
Okay, so thank you guys for your time. If we can help, you can ask on the, there's a Slack channel that is specifically for
One question.
partner InterSystems. And there's a hashtag InterSystems machine learning specifically as well.
Could
Go
you
ahead,
just join
somebody.
both of them, or?
You know, I think either will get to us, but if you're really specific to machine learning, that's what this is meant to be. This is sort of anything.
Perfect.
Okay.
Somebody had a question?
Me. So, do we need to know the password for the database?
No. What you'll see, I want to correct, our database is not open source. These templates are open source.
Okay.
Our database is free for developers and free for teams in this hackathon.
Okay.
And the community edition is, you know, has all features. It's limited only in capacity and it's not for production use, so it doesn't get production support. So if you go, we have a thing called Open Exchange, and you can, for example, take this COVID analytics thing and download it. If you're familiar with Docker, you just follow the git clone and Docker compose.
Okay.
And then you have your own instance there for anything you want.
Mm-hmm.
Which means you set the password.
All right.
Any other
Thank you.
question? Any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you guys very much. Good luck on the weekend and on your pitches.
Thank
Thanks,
you so
Jeff.